Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. Today's video is part of the Unusual Christmas Tree DIY collab. I'll tell you more about it shortly. Let's get on with the first DIY. Let's make a Christmas tree using Dollar Tree tumbling tower blocks. I used a total of 62 blocks for this tree. To make the base for the tree, I used 3 blocks going up and down and added a block to the top and the bottom of this set. I made 2 of these sets for the base. I stained both sets with antiquing wax and then glued the 2 sets together. I added large craft sticks to the bottom to help keep everything in place. Next, I started hot gluing sets of 3 blocks end to end. I also added a small craft stick on the bottom of each set. I did this for a total of 17 limbs. Next, I used a ruler and found the center to the limb. It was 15/16 on the center block. I used my drill and a bit the same size as the dowel. I would actually recommend using a bit a little larger than the dowel. I had to use scissors to make some of the holes larger when I started adding them to the dowel. I wanted the wood grain to show in the blocks, but I also wanted my tree to be green. I added some water, moss chalk paint, and black acrylic paint to a cup and mixed it well. I thought the moss was too light, so that's why I added the black to darken the green up a little. I painted one of the limbs first to check the color, wiped off the excess with a paper towel, and then went ahead and painted the dowel with the mixture and rubbed it off just like with antiquing wax. When I got ready to put the dowel in the base, I realized I needed to add another block to the top. So I simply hot glued it going against the grain and then drilled a hole in it. I filled the hole with hot glue and then inserted the dowel. I used more of the antiquing stain on this little block so it would match the rest of the base. I then set the base to the side and began staining the limbs of the tree with my green stain. I stained all 4 sides and both ends to each limb. This did take quite a while. I took a lunch break while the stain dried. When I got back, I added a layer of gloss Mod Podge. When staining wood using paint, it tends to be very flat and dull, and I wanted my tree to have a little bit of a shine. I did use my hot air gun to help speed up the drying time, And now it's time to assemble the tree. I began adding the limbs to the dowel. As you can see, I had to use my scissors to make most of the holes larger. That's why I suggest using a bit a size larger than the dowel. That way the limbs will just slide onto the dowel without a problem. At first I was going to try to stagger the limbs, but I didn't really like it. So what I wound up doing was just turning each limb a little as I went up the tree. And this is what it looked like when I was finished. I found this metal star in my stash and wanted to add it to the top of the tree. I removed the hanger from it and then rubbed the entire star down with rubbing alcohol. I have found by doing this, it helps the paint stick, especially to metal. I then painted it with ivory chalk paint. I wanted the star to look old and rustic, so I used my sanding block until I was happy with the way it looked. I then used a lot of hot glue to attach the star to the top of the tree. I probably used too much, but hey, better safe than sorry. I didn't want the star to fall off. I also added a very simple bow using some wired buffalo check ribbon I had on hand. I really like this little tree. Let me know in the comments what you think of this little tumbling tower block tree. I got some of these little wooden Christmas tree ornaments from Michael's for 99 cents. And I couldn't not get them. They were so stinking cute. I removed the twine hangers and the sticker from all the Christmas trees. I lightly sanded the trees with a sanding block. For the first tree, I used a hot glue gun and glued the tree to a Dollar Tree tumbling tower block. After the tree had set up, I stained it using Waverly wax. I just love the little indentions in the tree. I stained all sides, including the tumbling block. I then wiped off the wax using a paper towel. I wanted to give the tree more of a rustic farmhouse look, so I used a couple of layers of white chalk paint and painted just the tree on the front and the back. I didn't paint the star on top or the trunk at the bottom. After the paint had dried, I used my sanding block to give the paint a worn look. I just sanded it until I liked the way it looked. I then lightly sprayed the tree with rubbing alcohol and wiped it clean with a paper towel. I use rubbing alcohol because it dries faster than water. After letting the alcohol evaporate a little, I added Mod Podge to the entire tree to give it more of a finished look. I love the way this tree turned out. I just can't decide if I like the front or the back better. Let me know in the comments which side you like. For this little Christmas tree, I used scrapbook paper with a Christmas design. I stained the front of the tree with Waverly wax. Rub the excess off with a paper towel. And on the back, the smooth side, I only stained the star and the trunk. I applied Mod Podge to the tree and pressed down on the paper to make sure all the bubbles were smoothed out. I took my scissors and trimmed the paper from the side of the tree. I wanted the scrapbook paper only on the smooth side of the tree. After everything was trimmed, I went back with Mod Podge and glued down any of the areas that were sticking up or not glued down well. I thought the scrapbook paper was a little too new looking, so I applied a light layer of Waverly stain to give it more of an aged look. I then hot glued a Tumbling Towers block to the bottom as the base and stained it. I finished the tree off with a layer of Mod Podge for a finished look. For this tree, I used a wood slice as the base and hot glued the tree to it. I should have waited until I was finished with the tree on this one. The base made it a little harder to apply the paper. I traced around the tree and cut out the paper to the size of the tree. I applied Mod Podge to the back of the tree and added the paper. I pressed it down to make sure there wasn't any bubbles. I thought the paper was a little too new looking, so I used Waverly stain and stained the entire tree, including the paper. I also stained the base. I think next time I will leave the base natural. It just turned out too dark. These little Christmas trees turned out so stinking cute. I just wish Michael's would have had more than 3 of them. Today's video is part of the Unusual Christmas Tree DIY collab hosted by 4 very talented ladies. Tammy from Happiness Created, Mimi from Crafting in Mimi's World, Amanda from 6 Kids and a Glue Gun, and guest host Favy from Arrows DIY. You'll find links to their channels along with a link to the playlist in the description. So once you're finished watching the video, be sure to check out the playlist to see more Unusual Christmas Tree DIYs. I have a ton of scrap wood, so I decided to use a few pieces to make some little mini tier tray wood Christmas trees. I used my miter saw and cut the pieces at a 45-degree angle and sanded them. I painted one of the trees with Waverly white chalk paint. I applied a layer of chalk Couture surface wax to the front of the tree and buffed it out. I used this chalk Couture tree transfer and placed it on the fuzzing cloth 4 to 5 times to make the transfer less sticky. I applied the top portion of the transfer to the little wooden tree and rubbed it down with a roller. I applied a thick layer of chalk Couture ink to the transfer and then removed the excess and placed it back into the jar. I removed the transfer and set it with my heat gun. And just look at how stinking cute. For the next tree, I painted it with Waverly Moss chalk paint. I used twine and wrapped it around the tree several times. For the last tree, I painted it with Folk Art bright green paint. I used some Dollar Tree wire twine and wrapped it around the tree. And just look at how stinking cute these 3 little scrap wood trees are. And they didn't cost me anything. I had all the items in my stash. I have a box full of old bed springs that I removed from an old box spring back in the spring. I decided to try to make a small Christmas tree out of one of these. I used a 20 gauge jewelry wire to attach some jingle bells to the tree. I cut the wire long enough so I could wrap it around the bed spring a couple of times to hold the jingle bells on, and used a pair of pliers to secure them. I placed the jingle bells sporadically around the bed spring. When I was finished attaching the jingle bells, I thought it needed something else. I had some Dollar Tree berry garland and wrapped it around the bed spring. Now it's starting to look more like what I have in mind. I had a few of these old rusty stars in my stash and thought they would be cute at the top of the tree. I glued 2 of the stars together with hot glue and then lightly brushed over the star with Waverly white chalk paint. And attached the star by wrapping some of the berry garland around it. I also added a string of Dollar Tree lights to give a little something extra to my tree. I love how this BEDSPRING Christmas tree turned out. Let me know what you think in the comments. For this project, I used a couple of Dollar Tree square signs. They were already painted white, so I didn't have to paint them. I did glue scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby to the inside of both and added some nautical rope from Dollar Tree. The first thing was to stain the tree trunks with Waverly wax. I applied the stain with a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and then wiped it off with a paper towel. The pieces of wood I'm using are leftovers from previous projects, so there was very little cutting that I had to do for this. I used leftover tree pieces for the trees. The scrapbook paper I'm using I got from Tuesday Morning. I think I got it for about $5 for a 25-piece pack. I cut the scrapbook paper down so it would fit on the tree. I then used Mod Podge to glue the paper to the wood. I got this little brush out of the makeup section at Dollar Tree. The brushes work great for applying Mod Podge and also for painting. The bristles don't fall out like regular cheap paint brushes. I folded the edges over the wood and glued them down also. I went ahead and glued the small tree and the trunk to the box. I cut down the scrapbook paper for the larger tree and used Mod Podge the same way I did for the smaller tree. I wanted the second tree to stick out a little, so I used a tumbling tower block and hot glued it to the back of the tree. I also went ahead and glued the trunk to the tree. I made sure it was going to fit and then hot glued the second tree to the box. And just look at how adorable the first Christmas tree shadow box turned out. For the second box, I hot glued 2 pieces of wood together to make one tree. I wanted this tree to be made with twine, so I added a bead of glue at the bottom of the tree and then placed the twine in the bead of glue. I did this for the first few rows of the tree, and then I just started wrapping the twine until I got closer to the top, adding glue just when I needed it. Once I got to the top, I still didn't really like how it looked, so I just started wrapping the twine in different patterns up and down the tree. I attached a block and the trunk to the back of the tree. And just look at how stinking cute they turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think. I used some Dollar Tree wire ornament to make some adorable tier tray Christmas trees. I removed the bell at the bottom using a pair of jewelry pliers, and I also removed the star from the top. I suggest leaving the star on because I wind up at the end hot gluing the star back on. I used my drill and a large bit to drill holes in a couple of the little wood pieces from Dollar Tree. I didn't drill all the way through the wood, just enough to add the tree and some hot glue. It took some work, but I finally was able to get the little round end off of the bottom of the tree. It was tough, and I just had to keep moving the pliers back and forth until it finally broke. I added hot glue to the hole I had drilled into the wood and placed the end of the metal tree. I held it until the glue had set up enough to hold it itself. I wanted to make sure it would stand up straight. Now for the second tree. I used the screw gun again and drilled a hole the same way I did the first time. I made sure the bottom of the tree fit into the hole before using hot glue. Glad I did because I had to drill the hole a little bit more. I added the hot glue and held the tree like I did before. I then hot glued the stars back onto the tree, so I would recommend not taking them off to start with. I pulled on the wire limbs of the tree until the trees began to look something like what I was wanting. And oh my, they look so adorable on a Christmas tier tray. Let me know what you think in the comments. I used wood strips from Hobby Lobby and cut them in half, but you can always use paint sticks for this project. After cutting the strips down, I used a sanding block and sanded all the rough edges. Next, I used some buffalo check and Christmas themed scrapbook paper that I got from Tuesday morning. I cut the paper down to fit each of the strips and then applied Mod Podge to attach the paper to the wood. I smoothed everything out Added extra Mod Podge to any places that didn't stick, and set each piece to the side to dry. After drying, I used a sanding block and sanded the paper. This gave the paper an aged look, which is what I was going for. On the first tree, I added antiquing wax for more of an aged appearance. I applied the wax and rubbed it off with a paper towel. I then found the center of each piece and made a mark so the trees would be even when I attached them. I laid the pieces out, lining up the marks I had made, and attached them using craft sticks and hot glue. I then applied a layer of Mod Podge to give each of the trees more of a finished look. I used 3 tumbling tower blocks to create the stand. The first 2 I placed going up and down on the tree. I left enough room below them for the third block, which I placed going side to side, to create a stand for the Christmas trees. And just look at how stinking cute these 2 scrapbook Christmas trees turned out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. And if you found my channel through the playlist, I hope you will consider subscribing to our little family. Be sure to like and comment on this video. This really helps my video grow and be seen by more people just like yourself who are looking for amazing farmhouse decor DIYs. Merry Christmas! Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Happy crafting!